Good morning, Facebook and YouTube. It's Merritt Minnemeyer. I'm the founder and creator of Master of One Coaching, and we come here almost every Friday live for Leadership Live Fridays. And this morning, I have my dear friend and colleague, Carole Kennelly, who is the founder and CEO of Iconic Brand Studio. Good morning, Carole.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm so honored to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh my gosh, it's so my pleasure. And I tend to do this to people who I care about. I tend to wake you up really early in the morning on the West Coast and make you talk to me.
All right. As long as you are fine with me stumbling my words and sipping on coffee while we do this, we're good.
Hey, I do it anyway, and I'm 3 hours ahead, so all good to you. So, and you're calling in or signing in from Ventura County?
Is that right? California. Yeah, in Ventura County. Yes.
All right. So we're going to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about you. Tell us your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thrilled to. As you said, I'm the founder of Iconic Brand Studio, and Iconic Brand Studio launched this year, but after about a decade of being a brand developer. So my background is in developing brands for physical products. And then life-changing event happened. I became a mom and suddenly was like, wait, I don't want to be everywhere all the time on other people's time clocks. So I decided to go into brand development coaching. I did that for a year, had a great time, and then ended up having so many clients coming to me wanting me to actually do services for them that I hired a team. And now we run this agency, which has been wildly successful for its first year. I'm very, very honored and proud to be able to say that. And yeah, Iconic. You wanted to talk. I mean, your intro to this was about iconic leadership, and so I kind of wanted to sort of start there and just say, like, in terms of why iconic branding versus other branding, and what makes a brand iconic, and really what that comes down to is, I think, very similar to when people talk about iconic leadership. Like, what makes an iconic leader is, do you know your core values? Do you live your core values? Do you know the parts about yourself that really set you apart, that position you as, sometimes people will say, like they'll hide away some of their greatest strengths. So part of our brand development process is really going within. We do a lot of branding below the surface before you would ever see a visual brand. And when you think of any iconic brands that are out there, like we use Apple all the time as an example, when you think of the brand Apple, people typically think of what they see out in the world, but they don't realize how much intentional strategic planning goes into that final, express brand, the visual brand. So yeah, that's a big part of what sets us apart, is that we really do the inner work, and we have a full team of people who are all dedicated to kind of pulling out those golden nuggets that people often want to hide away because they feel like, maybe they're too much or not enough or whatever. And so we really try to encourage people to own their authenticity and at the same time stretch into the person that they want to be, which can kind of be like a funny, kind of like a baby horse learning to walk sort of experience at first until you figure it out. But yeah, so that's kind of my backstory, is product branding to personal branding online.
Well, and so full disclosure, you did my branding earlier in the year, and wait, hang on, backwards. This is mirrored. This, as my logo here, is part of the product that came out of that, and also on my website. And I was one of your guinea pigs, and so happy to be that. And I've gotten just multitudes of great response from that process externally, but also internally. And one of the things I say about that is that it really is exactly what you said, which is that I went in knowing that I had something to say, not really knowing how to say it. Even though I fancy myself a pretty good writer and a pretty good communicator, but somehow when it's about us, it's harder to articulate, because you want the best of you to come out. You don't want to sound boastful necessarily, and you're not really sure. I feel like I'm that, but am I really? Is that how people want to see me? Like, it's just very complicated sort of
Oh
ego.
yeah. I mean, and you're like too close to the mirror.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always say to my clients, like, ask your closest friends that you trust what they would say about you. Like
Mhm.
what they would say, like your greatest attributes are, like the things that they love about you most. Because oftentimes the things that our like closest friends and family members love about us the most are oftentimes the things that we kind of just push to the side and don't really own publicly. And so someone might say that, like, they love your sense of humor. And when you're building a brand, if you leave your sense of humor out of your brand, if that's not part of your brand voice or your brand personality, then you're kind of missing a big opportunity to connect on a level that's very authentic and natural to you.
Yeah. It's funny. You and I talked a lot about magic, like the magical piece of me and what that means, spirituality and stuff. And that's where this little
Mm-hmm.
star comes from. It'll be the North Star, but also having this little kind of glimmer of like this magical thing that happens in coaching and and that personality piece of it that I kind of hid away. And my son says later, he's like, "Mom, you're always talking about like spirit and source and like it's not that secret." I guess he's like, "No." Hiding it, but you're not. So yeah, right. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Owning those parts of yourself. I mean, because then you know this, but it's like a personal brand, oftentimes, like, people will think, okay, my personal brand needs to be about me. It needs to be this reflection of me. But just as much as it is a reflection of you, you have to take into account who you're talking to.
mhm,
And by owning those parts of yourself, like your spirituality, your magic, your woo, if you will, when you own that, you suddenly get very specific, or you get more specific. You get more specific on your languaging of knowing that what you're going to say is going to repel some people, which is perfect and it's exactly what you want. But it's
mhm.
going to, even more so, it's going to attract the people that are like, ooh, I'm a little woo. I want to know how to bring my magic out and bring it into my leadership. And so, I mean, it's, yeah, a lot of times I full on will admit I had the witch wound for a long time. The witch wound being that fear of speaking about my spirituality, or,
Mm,
my belief in energy and, manifestation, things like that, that, like, I mean, even now as I say it, there's still this part of me that's like, ooh, I come from an
yeah,
academic circle. All of my, my whole community are like academics who would probably be like, okay, law of attraction. But when you do the work and you see it, you see how it actually plays out in your life, it's hard to deny. And so it's part of my truth that I am similar to you. I do believe in energy. But I also believe in like the neuroscience of like
yeah,
a big part of coaching is retraining, like knowing how to identify the thought loops, the negative thought loops that keep us stuck, and knowing how to reprogram them. And so some people might call that magic. Other people would call that, the neurolinguistic programming, or, some sort of neuroscience based terminology. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what we call it. It's really about the transformation.
right.
And like
Yeah.
branding is my tool for transformation. Whereas, you do leadership coaching. And
Mm.
at the end of the day, it's kind of the same. I mean,
It is kind of the same thing, just different vehicles for the same kind of thing, right? Totally.
yeah, it's
I
all
think you
about
and I
stepping into a greater version of yourself.
yeah, yeah. Caroline, who is a new client, popped in and says, "Caroline, we need some woo." Is that what they call you in, Caroline? They're calling you woo? Caroline is a very magical being, and I'm super excited to have her in
Oh,
my group. She's wonderful, wonderful.
I love it.
Um, okay, so let's talk a little bit more specifically about your passions and how you. Yes, people did say that to you. That's awesome. I'm going to bring this up to you so that people can see because not everybody can see. She said, "Caroline, we need some woo." And she said, "Yes, people will say that to me." Yeah. Okay. So, if anybody else has another question or comment they want to make, please go ahead and pop in here. We'd love to see it. We're on YouTube Live right now. We're on my profile, Merritt Mittelmeyer. We're also on Master of One Coaching on Facebook. So you can find us any of those three channels. And if you come to us afterwards on the replay, we also will come back and answer the questions, or I will, and I'll shoot them over to Carole too if there's anything specific about her. So please feel free to jump in. And thanks, Caroline, for jumping in today. All right, so let's talk, Carole, about what I mean. You said kind of how you made the decision to make Iconic, and because you were a mom and you wanted to,
Mhm.
be more in control of your time and be the one who decides where and with whom and when you spend your time
Mhm.
doing what. Tell me a little bit more about the passion that you have for, and how this kind of turned into a service that you provide for people. Like, when did you know that you wanted to use this gift and this knowledge and this wisdom you have and really do something that would help people with it?
That's a great question. I actually didn't go into coaching thinking that this is what I was going to be doing. I went into a certification program. Just at this time, I had two littles. I was, breastfeeding my youngest. I think he was 6 months old at the time. And I had this kind of aha light bulb moment. You've seen the movie The Shift. It was like I had that like moment where I was like, I need to be doing something more. Like, it's time for me to get back to work, was sort of this like internal voice. And I can even like remember exactly what I was looking at when I like had that download. And I immediately called all of my friends who were in graduate school with me, who now have private practices as clinical psychologists. And I was like, should I go back? Should I get my clinical hours? Should I get my license? Should I do this? And all of them were like, no, do not do that. Like, no, go into coaching. Basically all of them are looking at the coaching industry being like, wow, they have a lot less restrictions on what they're able to do, and they're still facilitating healing and transformation. So basically I got this push, and I never really took coaching seriously, but I was like, okay. And anyway, as things do, the universe just lined up perfectly where this coaching program was starting the next week. And anyway, I'm in there thinking I'm going to be a coach and I'm going to help heal people and whatnot. But what I identified while I was in there was all these coaches going through this program got to the end and didn't know how to get clients. They didn't know how to position themselves. They didn't know how to create like a brand message. None of that was part of the coach training. So here people are dropping thousands of dollars into the certification and then thinking like, well, I just tell the world I'm a coach, and then people show up, right? And so I saw that as
I wish that were true.
yeah, right. And I was like, oh, this is like, I can help here. I know how to do this. I know how to position. I know how to, create brands. And so that's where I started. And that was early 2020 was when I launched what I was calling the Business and Brand Academy. And it was specifically for coaches and helping coaches develop their brand voice. Some of them opted into graphics packages as well, but for the most part, it was really like how to like really establish your coaching brand and some business basics. And then from there, that, like I said, we had enough people asking us to do the branding for them that we switched it into an agency. And now I'm actually entering back into like a hybrid model. But it was, I kind of feel like I sort of slid into this where I thought I was just going to be doing some sort of like female empowerment transformational coaching and ended up in the brand space. So I kind of also joke that branding is kind of my mask that I hide behind, where it's like, I get to do the work that I really want to do, but it's all sort of under this like guise of branding. And if you study branding, if you understand all the components that go into building a brand, all the different layers, it really is, it's kind of the perfect tool to facilitate a transformation. So.
Well, that's such a, what a wonderful vehicle for you. Truly, it's like such a, we talked about like your background too, and you and I have some similarities in our background, and how we sort of hid that part away, like, oh, don't tell anybody that I have this, theater degree. You film and television and theater, right?
Yeah. Well, where I went, that was all one degree. I did theater of the three, but yeah, film, television, theater, and then psychology was my other. But yeah, and those are two things that I would hide and say like, oh, I don't want people to know that I dropped out of my doctorate program. Like this, there's shame there. But I dropped out of my doctorate program because I didn't align with the diagnostic model that exists within the world of psychology, of labeling people with diagnoses so that they can get treatment. But then, I'm a big believer that when you put a label on somebody, you immediately limit them. Even if that label's good, you're still limiting. You're putting them in a box and telling them this is who you are. And once they decide this is who I am somebody with this problem. Yeah, it's harder and harder for them to see anything other than that. So anyway, that's why I left.
Yeah, and that's a really well, that's a long conversation right there, right? Because there's so many benefits and deficits of diagnoses, and then as the diagnoses change and evolve, and our understanding of the different behaviors change and evolve. I know how many people identify now as being on the spectrum, and
Mm-hmm.
probably more people than,
Neurotypical.
right,
Yeah.
right. But like, how many people are actually really neurotypical, and what does that really
Yeah.
mean? And like,
Yeah.
it just, I mean, I deal with that certainly in my own home. I have 3 kids who are, various diagnoses, and recently discovered that I had my own. And I was like, well, what does that mean for me? And like, I look back and I go, oh, well, that makes sense. But nobody had
Yeah.
those language 20 years ago. And, I recently discovered that I has a mild dyslexia. And I was like, well, of course I do, because my father had it
Wow.
and my brother has it. And I've taught that, kids with dyslexia, and my kids all have learning. So of course I do.
We are like twins, I swear. Like,
Oh, you see? Well, there
oh,
you go. Right.
yes. I was diagnosed dyslexic in college, and
Oh
I was
my
like, well,
God.
I've gotten this far. Like, what am I like? Guess we're
Yeah,
fine.
but what does that do to a young person, and right, all that? And then there's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
many,
yeah.
and yet there's so many things that are available once we have the diagnoses, right? We have services and supports and medication that helps people, and so
Yeah.
there's like, it just becomes, it's a very complex conversation.
It is. And it kind of ties into that idea of like owning those parts of yourself that you kind of want to keep hidden away
Mhm.
while stretching into the version of yourself that you want to become. When I was talking about like that like newborn horse that like doesn't, like baby horse that doesn't know how to walk yet,
Yeah.
like that's kind of that balancing act of like how much of my authentic truth am I wanting to share with my audience, and like not be defined by that,
Yeah.
like knowing that like I'm trying to get somewhere else. I'm trying to establish my authority, and establishing authority, I mean, that's a big part of branding is establishing authority. But if you there's different ways to do it, and I believe there's some wrong ways to do it, and then there's the right way, the way that we teach, which is owning that authentic part of yourself.
Mhm.
Being very strategic about I'm gonna share vulnerably these things about myself, and like give yourself permission to kind of like fumble your way into that next level, because it's, I mean, transformation, transition, like growth, it's not always clean and easy. I mean, typically it's
No, in
not.
fact, it's usually not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting that you're bringing that up too, because, and I think that it is as if there is this one way to be, and that we all need to aspire to that one way to be. And I
Yeah.
mean, certainly we can argue where that comes from. Is that, um, the, colonial patriarchal, white dude from the 1600s? Like, is that the icon that we're all struggling towards? Which of course
Yeah.
it isn't for anybody anymore. Or probably never did. Uh, but and it's actually not reality for anybody.
Yeah.
So, and yet we are still, most of us are, culturally, there's this sort of standard that we're trying to meet, and like, but it's not even a real standard anymore.
Yeah.
um
Well, how
and
often do you see this in the coaching world where,
all
people
the
enter
time,
the
of
coaching
course.
space, and I mean it's scary. You go in and all of a sudden, before you enter the coaching space, you oftentimes don't realize how many coaches there are that are doing the exact same thing as you.
Yeah.
And so you enter in and suddenly you're like, "Ooh, well, this person is doing it, like they're making money, so I'm going to do what they do." And I'm not necessarily knocking that. I think looking at your icons and taking inspiration from what they're doing until you find your voice is kind of a good place to start if you need to get some momentum going. Like
Yeah.
sometimes just taking action is what you need, and taking inspiration by the people who are, from the people that are doing well. That's why we pay mentors and coaches, is they're giving us their wisdom. But I lost my train of thought.
So getting on the train of what somebody else is doing until you find your own way, right? Learning.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, but yeah, the thing is
While
when
you're
you
at
start,
it.
when you get stuck in that like sort of copycat carbon copy coach thing, you fall into the category of suddenly you're just one of thousands
Yeah.
versus really being what we call iconic. Like you're missing your opportunity to own the parts of yourself that would make you iconic.
Well, and I love the way you defined iconic earlier, which is that knowing who you are and what your values are. I
Mm.
think that is the essence of so much coaching too. Whether, I work with businesses and founders of businesses, and oftentimes, more often than not, the solve for the crises, or the malaise or the trouble that they're in, maybe it's retention, maybe it's, disorganization, maybe whatever it is you've lost your way in terms of what you believe, and you're not really
Yeah.
sure what you're doing or why you're doing it anymore. And that sounds so simple, but, like, it's true. That's exactly what it usually boils down to, or some version of that. Like, what
Mhm.
you lost your inspiration, you wanted to come out and do this thing, and you're excited about it, and now it's like, "Man, I'm not excited about it anymore." Well, why is that? Well, because I compromised here and there and everywhere, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden I lost who I am, or lost what the business is, and people
Mhm.
around me think I don't have the integrity that I thought I had, or I want, and so they lose faith, and so it really comes down to those values, which, see, again, seems so simple, but so many companies and young, and I don't mean young age wise, but new business owners,
Mhm.
they miss that step because they don't think it's important. They think they want to get right to the money.
Yeah.
And you can make a little bit of money or even a lot of money for a short time doing that, but you can't sustain it, because you'll burn
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, you're not in energetic alignment
Yeah.
with yourself. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's a big part of, what we do at Iconic is making sure that your brand is aligned with your value. I mean, that's where we start. We start with core values. And honestly, our core values, it's easy to like see other companies' core values and be like, that feels good. I'm gonna say that like I value integrity or I value, whatever. But your real authentic core values come from your past. They come from moments in your life when you maybe had a struggle and learned something about yourself through the struggle. So
Mhm.
identifying, oh, that time when I was, this age and I failed and my father said this and whatever. It's like whatever negative thing, it's like what came up for you after that? Like what did you suddenly know about yourself? That is a core value. That is like I am this person. And anyway, I mean, yeah, when your core values go through everything that you do in your business, I mean, that's how you stand in integrity, is where you build your business around your values, not around the values of your team, not around the values of what you think you should be, but like really when you started out being like, this is my company and here are my core values that are going into it. Those like team values can come later, but like you have to have that central like backbone of your company.
Well, and the team, when they show up for you, right? And then the ones that stay with you are attracted to your core values because they align with those
Yeah.
two. So
Yeah.
that's when you have a solid team, is when they see
Absolutely.
you and your integrity and they go, "Oh, I this makes sense to me. This person is holding this vision and holding these values down, and I feel that I can safely trust this person because I believe they're firmly grounded in the values, and I align with those values." So you can certainly expound on that and explore
Mhm.
some scaffolding around it, and ultimately the people who will stick with you and will do the best
Mhm.
work for you and with you are the people who align with it. And so all the
Yeah.
more reason for the leader that needs to be super, super strong
Yeah.
in
I
that
mean,
belief.
it really comes back to people aligning around a why. I know Simon Sinek famously says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. But that, I mean, that's so true. Even, when you're building your brand and you're creating your brand purpose, like being very intentional about why does this brand exist? Like, what is its purpose? And knowing that, and that's, you're giving other people something to emotionally attach to, because your brand is not, I say this all the time, your brand is not your website. It's not your logos. It's not your photos. It's not even your copy. I mean, all of those things represent your brand, but your brand is an experience and it's
Mhm.
an intentional experience. You want somebody to feel something when they come into contact with wherever your business shows up, whether that's on your website or social media or wherever you are, maybe your brick and mortar. You want to create an experience that allows somebody to feel something. And that comes from those, like when I say branding below the surface, that intentionality around this is what we value. This is our purpose. This is our mission. Like, here is our vision. We have this big vision that's a stretch goal, but like, here's our vision. We imagine a world where, and then, that mission, how are we taking that purpose and that vision and bringing them together? How are we actually delivering on that, what we say are the purposes and the vision? But establishing those creates that identity that somebody can say, yes, this person or this company is for me, or no, they're not for me. But when you're not specific around that, then, I mean, it's sort of that, like, when you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. I mean, specificity around all of these, like, first initial stages of brand development, I say, like, you can't be too specific. Like, being specific is only going to benefit you. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, especially when you're like when we start talking about who's your audience, who's your niche. People are like, but I can do so many things. I mean, how many coaches can do so many things? There's a lot of really, really talented people out there. But when they first enter the market and haven't established their authority yet, trying to say that I can 10x your income and I can heal your, childhood wounds and I can, whatever. It's like, I just see people all over the place where it's like, they haven't really, they're just not specific enough. And establishing yourself in one specific niche allows for you to then, once you build that authority, you can start branching out. I like to use the example of Brene Brown. Who doesn't love Brene Brown? But she first started, like, when she hit the scene, she was very niche. I'm talking about shame and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I am a shame expert. That was like how she identified herself. And now she talks on leadership. She talks on healing. She talks, I mean, she can talk. Yeah, she can talk on any topic at this point because she's established so much authority in a very specific niche. And that's sort of where I try to steer clients. Is like, I know it feels like you're putting yourself in a box, but start there. So, like, do I imagine I'll always be doing brands for coaches? Probably not. That wasn't always my big vision. But when I speak to coaches and healers, online service providers, when I speak to them, it's a different language. Similar to, like, thinking about, like, how you would speak to your professor or your mentor versus your best friend versus, your 17-year-old niece. Like, these are all different tones and voices that you would use. Knowing who you're talking to in your brand is that key that's going to help your audience know, yes, she's talking to me, or I don't know who she's talking to.
I had a colleague who said the other day, that 25% of people are going to hate us and 25% of people are going to love us and 50% don't care either way. So you might as well talk to the 25% who love you.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
Not for those people, because the other ones don't matter. So, right, they're not going to buy it for you anyway or care about what you do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's be intentional about it.
And I love, so this is a good example of the power of brand for someone who is in a space like you and I are in, or anybody who is, also, you mentioned Apple before, like, right, those of us who are diehard Apple fans and who will go through, thick and thin with that brand, which I have, and, since I was a kid, right? And I'm talking to you I have all Apple products now, and, people can have different thoughts about that, but that's, those of us who have loyalty to a certain brand because of certain reasons. So I was on a conversation yesterday with one of my coaches who was helping me prepare for something that I am doing later today. And I'm feeling nervous about it. And I won't get into details about it. But she's like, she's coaching me on stuff that is very basic. Like, how are you showing up? Who do you want to be today? Who in this situation? How would you like this to play out? And in order for it to play out the way you want it to play out, what do you need to tell yourself? What do you need to believe? And I'm just struggling. I'm going, this is just, why is it so hard? I'm so caught up about this particular situation. I'm so nervous about it. And so, like, my anxiety bells are going off, and I'm wearing my sweater, right? She goes, Merritt, be that star on your sweater. And I was like, how simple is that? It's right. I wear it all the time. It's like, that's what it put out. It's like, this is our magic, right? That we want to provide. We want to remind other people of their magic. This is the North Star, the woo, the essence of the unspoken thing that makes us, makes anybody, right?
Yeah.
And she's pointing out to me right there, it's quite obviously you're abandoning yourself here. Like, what are you doing? It's such like oh my gosh, I can't believe how easy it was for me to lose sight of it, and thank goodness I had this beautiful sweater with my beautiful friend to remind myself about what I'm doing, right?
I mean, that is such a huge part of all of this is, if you want to stand out, you need to have the courage to get uncomfortable and become the person you want to be. You might not be that yet, but, like, I love that, like, be that star on your sweater. Like, we all know deep down what we're made of. We know, like, and a good way to kind of find that is like, I mean, Iconic is the name of my company, but look at your cultural icons. Look at the people you look up to. The reason you look up to them is because you see something in them that you know exists inside yourself. You
Mhm.
know, like there is a part of me that could do that. And so when I say like, yeah, it's like be the star, like own your opportunity for your greatness, like step into that. That's the only way that you are going to differentiate yourself, position yourself. That's the best way to find your white space in the online noise is
Mhm.
to really own the, own your magic, own your
Yeah.
greatness. So I love that.
It's not easy to do all the time because we do wobble, but and that's part of it because every time we wobble, we get a little stronger, we can come back, right? I
Yeah.
wanted
Well, the stronger your message, the more you're going to attract people that want to push back against it. So then you
oh,
get it like,
right.
ooh.
Yeah, and so it's always a test, and
Yeah.
not in that way, but it's going to test your resolve, and that's what helps us become stronger. Caroline
Yeah.
mentioned something else there. She says it's so important to have symbols around us. I believe that remind us of who we are for sure, right, that is the symbols of what we believe spiritually, what we believe about ourselves, what we believe, what we identify with. Um, Again, the power of an apple as an example. Like there's a whole culture of people who identify with that brand. There's also like
Yeah.
Nike or
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, or religious symbols. I mean, those are so powerful.
Yeah.
And of course, we could dive into the whole like collective unconscious Jungian like effective or experience
Yeah.
symbols um, and so part of the branding that you do is not just slapping a logo on somebody, but saying, how does the visual connect with who you are? And how can you
Yeah.
like stand behind that or stand next to it or stand in front of it and go, this is how we part of it, how we communicate our values and the work that we do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of people who will invest in a brand. And what that looks like for them is they go to a graphic designer and say, I need a logo package. I need a brand package. And what you're not getting when you go to that type of experience is you're not getting that inner. I mean, you might fill out a questionnaire that asks you sort of, what are your values? Like, what's might ask you that, but they're not necessarily going to be coaching you through that and pulling out, those, your magic, your wisdom. That's something that I do actually really believe sets Iconic apart is my whole team is built around this
Mhm.
belief that we're building a brand for who you're becoming. It's not necessary. We're not really interested in building a brand around who you are right now because your brand needs to be fluid. We're always growing and you want to build a brand that allows for that growth and that actually sets the foundation for the next level. So um, that is, I mean, a big part of our offer is copywriting, messaging, making sure that what you're saying is, communicating that the stuff that exists below the surface. Whereas again, when you go to a graphic designer and get a logo package or whatever, it doesn't include your copy. And that's your messaging is such a huge part of your brand.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's, I could talk about this for days. Keep stopping
Well,
it.
yeah. So I mean, it really is like really deep and fun work to do too, especially I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
work with coaches and service providers who are in the online space, easy for me to say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we all like to dig into this, right? It's like, oh, we
Yeah.
can talk about this kind of juicy like identity stuff, and it's so much fun. But more than that, I think, or expanding from there is that part of the beauty of doing coaching that I do, which is what I'll say what I love doing is that working with founders and business leaders, we are impacting the culture of the world because business
Mm-hmm.
is an integral part of how people live every day and work every day. And hey, look who just joined us.
Hey.
So Carol and I met through Alok in his amazing mastermind contain. So iconic. Yes, she is. She is. And so he brought us together. Thank you, Alok, for showing up today. It's lovely to see you here. Um, and you guys go way back, right? You've known each other for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew Alok back when I was in the like product branding space, and he and I had brick and mortar businesses and met through a networking company organization in Arizona, and so that was actually why I hired him as my mentor because he knew what I what I was capable of. And I
Mhm.
knew I needed somebody who would hold me to the standard of, I mean, honestly, when I met him, I was at this, like, I don't know if I'm meant to be a coach. I was really like, I had myself gotten caught up in that, showing up in a way that I thought I needed to show up and
Mm.
wearing my coach
Yeah,
hat. And like,
yeah.
that was really exhausting. And I didn't know who I was talking to anymore. And I didn't know, I mean, so I reconnected with Alok, entered his mastermind. And 3 months later was when I launched Iconic Brand Studio. And it was, I mean, he sort of was that extra push I needed for owning who I am and remembering that, what I'm capable of and what I have accomplished in the past, and knowing that that's just a small nugget of like where I'm going. So anyway, slight distraction,
No, but
but
it's a good example of what you're talking about, which is showing up to be truthfully who you are so that you can really do the magical work that we're meant to do. And
Mhm.
so what I was going to say about that is that we get to impact the culture of businesses, and that impacts people's lives in such a profound way. It impacts the wealth that comes into their lives, the wealth that they circulate and share, and then
Mhm.
how they then take that wealth and then share it with others, right? So
Yeah.
being value based in your branding, which reminds you about who you are, tells other
Mhm.
people who you are, and attracts those other people. Then also, and it reminds you of, like, what the business that you're doing. It's a part of that integrity of running a really grounded and powerful business. It's
Yeah.
keeping us all accountable to what we say we want to accomplish and do in the world in a way that is way beyond just making money, or a
Oh,
product
yeah.
even.
Yeah,
Because there's
that's, I mean,
plenty of coaches out there who can, go through the motions and ask the right questions and go through the script.
mhm.
And I've certainly done this before too, and not remember to show up fully, and not remember to really listen, not remember
Mm.
to help people hold that space for the transformation, which is really how we evolve, and not just
Yeah,
ourselves, but how we evolve our businesses, how we evolve the planet. Right. So anyway,
absolutely.
there goes a
Well,
tangent.
well, and like when you show up with like as the watered down version of who you really are, that, playing small, when you show up that way, like you're again, it's like you're missing your opportunity to really have that impact. And the reason I love working with coaches. I call them like coaches and healers. I call them my rebels because they're brave enough to see that things can change in the world. They're brave enough to say, you know what? It doesn't matter where you come from, or it doesn't matter what your life circumstances. You can change. You can
Mhm.
be better. You can elevate. And especially coming out of like pandemic and all of that, it was really I was watching a lot of people fall into this, like, this is just the way it is. Life sucks. Like everything's hard. And then the coaches are kind of shining stars out there saying, like, you have the opportunity and the choice to change this. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be comfortable, but if you're willing to do the work, you can transform your life. And like for me, I'm like, oh, I'm always here for the rebels. I'm always here for the ones that are going to like stand against what, sort of the society is saying or has agreed, like this is the way it is. And we're just, going to sit here and grumble about it and not actually do anything to change.
And
Um,
the crazy thing is we actually believe it.
yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
that we're saying it, we actually believe it, right?
Yes, because we've done the work ourselves and we've transformed our lives. And even just joining that mastermind, for example, that was a big turning point for me where, yeah, I had a good month or a good year in 2020 fiscally. I had hit that six figures that all coaches say they want to hit. And by the end of the year, I was so burnt out. I was
Mhm.
so misaligned. I just like felt like I was showing up for like as the version that everyone else needed me to be, and I didn't allow space for me to really be who I am. And so joining that mastermind, doing like I did the inner work inside there. And then like when I relaunched, it was like a completely different energy, speaking to a completely different client. Um, I found so much freedom in being able, like when I just decided to authentically own who I was and what I wanted to do, bringing like my silly theater side into what I do, like all of that just allowed for freedom and fun and
Mhm.
playfulness. So yeah, and if I continue to leave those parts out, like I had told myself, ooh, I can't let my clients know that I have a theater degree. It's embarrassing. That's not professional.
Oh,
Uh,
so
yeah,
funny. You're
anyway.
like, you like have so many similarities.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yes.
All
We
right,
should
my
do
dear.
our own little musical someday.
We should, for sure. For sure. I mean, I've got people who could pull, yeah, we could talk about well, I could talk with you about this all day long, and it is 10:40, so I'm gonna let you go 7:40 your time. So let's get to the point now where what is that one kind of, if you could wrap all this up in a bow and gift one little nugget to our audience, what would you like to do? Let's say about that.
I would say if you're out there trying to figure out like how to stand apart, how to like make this business work, whether you're a coach or I mean, I know your audience is vast. Um, it's really about owning who you are and living to the fullest expression of that version of you. So that's my golden nugget is, if you really want to stand out, you have to get uncomfortable and become that version of yourself that you want to be. Like you might not be there right now, but the only way to get there is to actually just go for it. Like throw yourself into what it is that you're meant to be and do it like full throttle. Don't just, we're not just dipping toes here. It's like just own this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. That's honestly like when people say like, how do I stand out? You got to go all in.
Yeah.
Like really
And
be
so
authentically.
the beauty, one of the beautiful pieces about what you all do at Iconic and the way you lead them is that, so I feel like I have the freedom and the license to be fully myself and do all the crazy things. And also I can use this beautiful logo to keep out in front. So I'm a mess maybe behind this, but boy, do I look good out in front, and I can kind of use that to guide me along the way. And as long as we can sit here and be like, oh, I feel like a disaster, but I look so good doing it. So it's
well, you have authority. I mean, I hate to say it, but like the visuals that you put out there, I mean, they say a lot about, I mean, they communicate a lot about where you are and what level of business you're in. And if you can establish, if you're like, you know what, I know where I'm going and I'm going to build this brand for where I'm going, then you're building that authority. And the reason like big companies hire celebrity endorsers is because it's authority. We like our brains want to know that the thing that we're investing in is tested, is, that people back it, that, they're gonna, that there's,
well, that it works,
it's recommended. Yeah. And a lot of that is communicated in how you visually present yourself. So having sleek logos, yeah, that's not your whole brand, but it is definitely a component. So,
well, and so Ian, who was on a few weeks ago here, says that FYI in the corporate innovation space, we actually use theater analogies, front stage, backstage. Thank you, Ian. Thank you for that.
I love that.
Yeah, it's funny, right? That we have shame around other people admire, and I think that's true just about anywhere, right? I mean, maybe not all the things we have shame about, but there's certainly and people who want to hide parts of themselves, like you said, are usually the parts that are most interesting to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes us human.
Yeah, for sure. All righty. So if you are out there in the coach and online service space, or just feel that you are aligned with Carole and Iconic Brand Studio in some way, and you want to reach out to them, how do they do that, Carole?
Well, you can find me at iconicbrandstudio.com or on Instagram, Iconic Brand Studio. That's the easiest way. Facebook, I'm also on Facebook. And yeah, feel free to reach out. You can email me, Carole at Iconic Brand Studio. And then, yeah, just for anybody who's interested in learning about branding, I do have a program that's launching November 1st. It's an 8-week program that is all about teaching you how to do the branding below the surface. So it's all the branding energetics. It's, coaching around expanding into a bigger vision or a bigger version of who you are. And then of course we also offer our branding packages that include everything from, graphics, copywriting, website, brand photography, brand video, all of those services. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and if you want one of example of many, you can certainly check out my website, masterofonecoaching.com, and see, because the full thing there is, with the exception of the photos were done by Jeff Tibbsman here in the Hudson Valley, everything else there is you guys. So, and then our work together. So it was an amazing experience, and we became good friends through that. And even though we've never met in person.
I know, you're such a dream client, and we've had this opportunity. I've been in New York and you've been in California, but it's never really lined up. So
Not yet. Not yet.
one of these days.
Well, thank you so much, Carole, for getting up in the morning early and
Yeah.
sharing your magic with us. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
And like I said, for those of you who are catching on the replay, go ahead and drop your comments or questions here. I'll come back. And if you have something specific, I will direct it to Carole and we will get those answered for you. And Carole, if you'll hang out for a minute, I'm just going to sign off here. So I'm going to say thank you and goodbye. And I'm just going to take you out of the studio for a minute. So that is it for Leadership Live Friday for today, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again. We are here every Friday, just about every Friday at 10 o'clock Eastern time here on Facebook and YouTube. For more information about how you can elevate your business and yourself as a founder of your world-changing business, please visit masterofonecoaching.com. You can sign up there for our newsletter and get in touch with us about how you can become the best leader in your business and in the world that you'd like to be. And join us next week for another amazing guest here on Leadership Live Fridays. Have a great weekend, everybody.